Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to welcome you to the Invested in Queensland Critical Minerals Investor Forum. I'm Charisse Mullen, the Assistant Minister for Treasury, and I will be your Master of Ceremonies for today. To begin, as we walk together on a path towards voice, treaty and truth, I acknowledge that we meet today on the land of the Jagera and Turrbal peoples. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and thank them for their ongoing custodianship of the land, winds and waters we all share. Can I also acknowledge our host for today, the Honourable Cameron Dick MP, Queensland Treasurer and Minister for Trade and Investment, the Honourable Madeleine King MP, Minister for Resources and Minister for Northern Australia, and the Honourable Scott Stewart MP, Queensland Minister for Resources. I would also like to welcome our speakers, moderator and panellists, and extend a very special welcome to you all, our invited guests. There will be an opportunity to ask questions during the panel discussion, and we will try to answer as many of your questions as possible. The speakers joining us today are industry leaders and experts from across the critical minerals and resources sector. Energy transition and creating low-emission economies are current topics discussed globally. Critical minerals will be vital in developing clean energy technologies as part of that energy transition. Queensland is looking to attract investment and find partners to contribute to generational challenges we face to decarbonise and transition to a clean energy economy. Today, you will hear the government and the private sector perspective and ultimately the partnership perspective. Today's forum will conclude at 5 p.m. and it will be followed by some networking in the foyer, which I encourage you to join. To begin, may I please welcome to the podium our host for today, the Honourable Cameron Dick MP, Treasurer and Minister for Trade and Investment.
Well, thanks, Charisse. G'day, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to Brisbane, our state's capital, and welcome to Queensland. Can I begin today by acknowledging the land that we meet on the land of the Jagera and Turrbal people and pay my respects to their elders for their ongoing custodianship of the land, winds and waters we all share. And I thank many of the businesses here and companies here who are now working with our First Nations people to create economic opportunity, employment and prosperity. And I thank you for what you do for our First Nations people. Can I acknowledge my good friend, the Federal Minister for Resources and the Minister for Northern Australia, Madeleine King. Great to have you over here in the East, Madeleine, and thanks so much for making time to be part of this forum today. Can I acknowledge another good mate, the State Member for Townsville and Queensland's Minister for Resources, Scott Stewart. And can I thank my good friend Charisse Mullen, who's also the Assistant Treasurer and does so much work with me, particularly in the trade and investment space. So welcome everyone, and I'm delighted to be your host this afternoon. We've got a few additional people up the back. Can we get them a few more chairs? The more the merrier. So you're very welcome, and we hope you don't have to stand up, but you're very welcome to be with us today, and we hope we can get some seating for you. So come tomorrow, this whole venue will be buzzing with global interest in our state's abundant resources. And I'm just so keen as Queensland's Treasurer and Minister for Trade and Investment to capture that interest. And I'm even keener to turn that interest into investment, to turn investment into clean energy, the clean energy that our nation and that our world needs. And that's the aim of today, to make the most of having the mining world in our state's capital. This is the first time Australia has hosted the World Mining Congress, and hosting the Congress is important to us given our position as the world's fourth largest coal producer. Queensland's also second in the world for lead production, third for bauxite and zinc, and fifth for silver. Our state, of course, has a long and proud mining history. We have a proven track record of mobilising to develop new sectors, from gold to coal to CSG. We've got a thriving METS sector. A couple of months ago, 30 METS companies from Queensland travelled with me to Chile for Expo Min 2023, the biggest mining conference in South America. And they were there to showcase Queensland METS ingenuity, invention and innovation. I was with them and I saw firsthand the demand for their services and their technology. And our state has, of course, set new records for our exports, reflecting the surge in the value in coal production in particular. So we've had to wait 65 years for this Congress. Well done, Scott, for bringing it to Queensland, and Madeleine. but we're not going to let the opportunity pass. We want to turn this gig into a real opportunity for Queensland and to tell each and every one of you we are open for investment and we welcome your investment in our state. I also want to thank our consortium of partners who helped make it happen because we think the timing is absolutely right. Queensland is growing, diversifying and transforming. In many areas, including critical minerals and metals, we're leading the way. The 2032 Brisbane Olympic and Paralympic Games have given us the added certainty and confidence to accelerate our economic growth because Queensland is ahead on so many fronts. Along with Western Australia, Queensland has the strongest performing economy in the country. We've created more jobs than any other state during the course of the pandemic, 250,000, actually 264,000 now, since the start of the pandemic. That's more than any other state or territory. We've just published a $12.3 billion Australian dollar surplus, the largest surplus ever recorded by any state or territory government, and that's helped us to cut state debt so we can improve our borrowing profile for the future to invest where our state needs, as we are the big growth state of the Commonwealth. And the National Australia Bank monthly business survey released early this month shows that Queensland continues to enjoy the strongest business conditions among the big three, Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria, with us only be beaten by Western Australia. What a surprise, the other great mining state of Australia. It's not a competition unless you're winning, Madeline. We've also got our state's big build underway. That's the biggest infrastructure investment in our state's history. When I did our budget last year, we projected our capital works program over 4 years would be $59 billion. When I did our budget a little under 2 weeks ago, we now project our capital works program in this state will be $89 billion, a $30 billion increase. And we can do that. We can invest in our state because that's what our state needs. As the world seeks to limit, of course, the impacts of climate change by reducing emissions, we are actively investing in the infrastructure and projects to make renewable energy generation, transmission and storage to make that a reality in Queensland. As of October 2022, up to $151 billion of Queensland resources and energy projects were in the investment pipeline, $151 billion. And on private capital expenditure, Queensland's mining industry reached $8.7 billion in 12 months to March 2023, up 10% year on year. You're going to hear today from Tony Knight, Queensland's Chief Government Geologist, about the sector and where those opportunities lie. And I'm keen, like all of you are, to maximise the benefits of the global transition to clean energy. Renewables above the ground and critical minerals below the ground. Cobalt, vanadium, rare earth minerals concentrated in our northwest and northeast minerals provinces. These are world-class deposits, $500 billion in the northwest minerals province alone. And you'll hear today we're in a prime position to use those minerals to help shift to a decarbonised economy. We've got a plan, our Queensland Resource Industry Development Plan, a 30-year vision to support that journey for our resources industry to be resilient, responsible and sustainable, to grow as it transforms. It's not a plan that discounts the importance of our traditional mining sector either. It's a plan built on our success. Mining royalties are supporting our clean energy transition. Likewise, it's not a plan that downplays the impacts of mining on our environments and our communities, something we all have to engage with to ensure mining maintains its social licence and continues that pathway to ESG that our customers and clients are looking for. So we've embedded ESG considerations in our decision-making processes. So our plan shows Queensland is eager and ready for the future of clean energy production. We're placing ourselves at the forefront of innovation and commercialisation to drive achievements in manufacturing, defence and scientific research. A great example is our $75 million demonstration scale critical minerals processing facility, the first of its kind in the Asia Pacific that we are building as a government in Townsville. We call it the Queensland Resources Common User Facility. It'll be built in Townsville, for those of you who don't know much about Queensland, 2 hours flight north of where we are today. Initially, it will process vanadium for use in large-scale batteries. The only other facility of its kind anywhere in the world, to my knowledge, are in Finland and in Germany. So we are bringing this facility to life in Queensland because we are serious about joining the battery race. Overall mineral demand for battery storage is expected to rise ninefold over the next 2 decades. If global emissions targets shift to net zero, that number will jump by a factor of 40. So in the electrical vehicle battery market alone, annual global investment is predicted to surge in excess of $550 billion by 2030. And that's just round the corner. So our facility wants to plug into that demand. It will accelerate commercial mining projects in our regions, support industry development, and promote investment in advanced manufacturing. All good reasons to join us on this journey in Queensland. We've got a collaborative exploration initiative up as well, thanks to Scott and his team, to help strike new deposits. We're investing $5 billion now in our transformative CopperString 2032 transmission line. That's an 1,100 kilometre transmission link between Townsville and Mount Isa. That will unlock billions of dollars of critical minerals mining in the Northwest Minerals Province and significant new renewables around Hughenden. And we've got a new critical minerals and battery technology fund with $100 million to drive commercialisation outcomes. That fund will accelerate pit to product supply chains and help meet demand for clean energy technologies. It will assist businesses and industry-led consortiums to become globally competitive, reach commercial viability, or become product ready. And for all of that, I'm pleased to announce today that fund is now open and applications are open. You can go to the website, you can check your eligibility and you can apply online. So if you'll stop listening and start tapping into your phones or your iPads, you're welcome. Today, you'll also hear a bit about a few companies with impressive sustainability credentials. These companies have chosen to invest in Queensland for critical minerals and associated manufacturing opportunities. One of those is the Veco Group, who will manufacture Australia's first utility-owned vanadium flow battery, destined to play a huge role in the Queensland supergrid. Another is EQ Resources, who is transforming the tungsten assets at Mount Carbine in North Queensland, a critical mineral in high demand here and globally. Plus, we've got Queensland Pacific Metals. Their tech project, which stands for the Townsville Energy Chemicals Hub, will be supplying critical battery metals for the electric vehicle industry. These companies are pointing their charging lights where Queensland is heading. Okay, it's a nice attempt at a joke, didn't work, but I'll keep going anyway. We haven't got time. We've got to keep going. This critical minerals future is so important. I'll leave it to them to share their stories better than I can. However, there is a common theme. Other than contributing to decarbonisation, it's the regional story. I know they agree on one thing. Queensland makes investing as easy as possible. We've got a 10-year Queensland Energy and Jobs Plan, full of opportunities for new industries and investment. And in our budget, I handed down again 2 weeks ago, we've now made a $19 billion commitment to turn that plan, which we designed and announced 8 months ago, we're turning it into reality. That's a very significant investment that's going to go into direct investment, but also into the balance sheets of our GOCs to make sure that Energy and Jobs Plan comes to life. We've got our Invested in Queensland program, $500 million, which is building partnerships with the private sector. Today's forum is part of that program, delivered by Queensland Treasury. Trade and Investment Queensland are here also. That's our global business agency for Queensland with 18 offices in 14 key markets across the world and 8 regional markets here in Queensland. Then there's the Queensland Investment Corporation, one of the jewels in our financial crown in Queensland, $100 billion under management, our fully funded defined benefit superannuation scheme, and another $50 billion in private money under management, and Queensland Treasury Corporation as well. So those 4 agencies are your starting point for investment advice and facilitation in Queensland. So we ask you to reach out because we are here to help you. So thanks so much for your attendance here today. We are really delighted with the number of people here, but our resources industry in Queensland can only operate at its best when it has a supportive federal government. That's the truth. And there's no greater supporter of the resources sector in this state and across the nation than the Federal Minister for Resources, Madeleine King. It's fair to say Minister King's first year in the role has been one where the resources industry has faced great challenges. But under her stewardship, the industry has emerged stronger and with a clearer vision of future opportunities. Of course, the Albanese government's $500 million investment in its critical minerals strategy, which we'll hear a bit more about today, I'm sure, is in complete alignment with the Queensland government's vision for this vital part of our resources sector. So Madeleine is a friend of mine workers, she's a friend of mining communities, she's a friend of mining companies, she's a proud Western Australian. There's only one thing wrong with her, she's from the West. She could be a Queenslander, but it's the next best thing. But she's a great friend of our state, and I want to welcome you here today, Madeleine. Please welcome the Federal Resources Minister, Madeleine King.
Thank you very much, Cameron, for that very, very kind welcome. They did stamp my passport on the way into Queensland last night. I managed to make it through. I want to thank the Queensland Government and the Treasurer himself for invitation to speak at this Critical Minerals Investor Forum today. I also want to acknowledge the Turrbal and Yuggera people, the traditional custodians of the land on which we are meeting, and today and to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and I want to extend that respect to any First Nations people in the audience today. And of course, I want to acknowledge my friend, the Queensland Treasurer, Cameron Dick, a great asset, of course, for Queensland, and a fantastic treasurer and always a supporter of the resources industry. And also the Queensland Minister for Resources, Scott Stewart. I've spent a couple of hours with Scott today and the other resources ministers from around the country at a ministerial roundtable, and it's always good to have Scott's wise input. Queensland and WA are different from the rest of the states, and don't we all know it when we go to these round tables, Scott? But it was still very, very a productive meeting we had earlier today. And also want to acknowledge Charis Mullen, the Assistant Minister for Treasury, here today. And finally, I also have to acknowledge, of course, the Queensland Maroons as the clear owners of the State of Origin series in this country. So. When I first met Scott, I was made Minister for Northern Australia. He gave me one thing. He said, well, really, you have to go for Queensland. And I go, fair enough. So I'm all in on the Cowboys and on Queensland. So that really does make it easier for me when I'm having arguments with the Prime Minister, who, of course, goes to the Blues. Anyway, that's a very local story. We'll move on to more about mining. As we all know, mining has always involved an element of luck, and it always has been an industry that attracts entrepreneurs and risk takers. It's a mindset that Queenslanders and those of us in Western Australia understand, I think, and in fact we celebrate it. Finding and developing mineral resources is expensive and it's time consuming. Miners driving a project from exploration to production routinely take on significant debt with no guarantee of returns. And now navigating that road means a level of uncertainty. But mining investment can be mitigated by two things. Of course, a quality mineral endowment, and of course, public policy settings that encourage and support exploration and production. In Australia and in Queensland, you have both. We have the geology and we have the policy to make mining investment right. Our geology is unique and is covered around the world, but this should not be taken for granted. We do need to have those policy settings in place to encourage investment, to keep that investment and to build up more and more of it. Our reserves of lithium, cobalt, tungsten, vanadium, niobium, antimony and manganese are in the top 5 globally. We are the #1 lithium producer internationally and the second largest producer of zirconium. And we have energy transition metals such as copper and zinc to complement this, and we have 11% of global copper reserves, which puts us second only to Chile. Mount Isa and Cloncurry have world-class copper and zinc deposits, and we know that Queensland will play an important role in this, particularly with its vanadium potential. While vanadium is traditionally used in high-strength steel, it is increasingly being applied in vanadium redox flow batteries, as the Treasurer mentioned earlier. And unlike the better-known lithium-ion batteries, vanadium redox flow batteries boast superior durability for long-term storage and also offer a greater potential for recycling, which will be more and more important in coming years. And I do want to congratulate and acknowledge the Queensland Government for its $5 billion investment in the CopperString 2032 project. That's going to connect the state's northwest minerals province to the national energy market, and the announcement of last week, I think it was, of over $500 million over the next year to supercharge the construction of CopperString is really very welcome. I know for everyone in this audience and for the development of the northwest minerals province in the northwest of this state. It is this type of pioneering investment by a government supportive of the resources sector that will open up the province and therefore open up new investment into this all-important sector. Queensland is making great strides in building battery storage, as we've seen by the very recent opening of Veco Group's $26 million Townsville vanadium battery manufacturing facility. And I note that this project was supported by the Queensland Government through the Queensland Jobs Fund. Our appeal as a mining investment destination, in addition to this important investments by state governments and support of the federal government, is underwritten by a stable democratic government and our respect for the rule of law. Our taxation levels are moderate and our regulatory processes are transparent. When you add to the mix, it is clear that our expertise in mining equipment, technology and services, you can see why Australia is an attractive place to invest. Investment will be key to developing the mining projects that we and our partners need to decarbonise our economies. As I've said often and repeated earlier this morning, the road to net zero runs through the Australian resources sector. We are well placed in Australia to leverage our critical minerals endowment and investor appeal and drive the global clean energy transition. Our task now is to refocus on our policy and investment settings to secure that pipeline of new projects. Engagement and collaboration across jurisdictions will be critical to that process. And today, as I said earlier, I was pleased to meet with my state and territory counterparts here in Brisbane for that ministerial roundtable. We discussed the new critical minerals strategy, which provides a national framework to support the growth of Australia's critical minerals sector. This strategy sets out a vision to grow the industry, create jobs and downstream industries, strengthen global supply chains and help Australia become a renewable energy superpower. The strategy is a whole of government plan to 2030 and will be an enduring framework beyond that to guide future Australian government policy decisions. The strategy recognises the importance of crowding in investment finance to develop new projects and grow Australia's downstream processing capability. And I'm pleased to report that the ministers with me at the roundtable today have agreed to work together on a more cohesive and comprehensive approach to attracting new investment, building on the work of Australian Minerals and Austrade. In releasing the strategy, as the Treasurer foreshadowed, I was pleased to announce the government's commitment to ensure the Northern Australia Infrastructure Facility earmarks $500 million for the critical minerals projects. Although some in the south are not as happy, the truth is most of the natural endowment that is the critical minerals endowment of this country is in the north of the country. So to use NAIF to push forward that investment is a logical choice. But these projects may also be able to access support through other Australian government financing bodies, including Export Finance Australia, the Clean Energy Finance Corporation and the $15 billion National Reconstruction Fund. The National Reconstruction Fund will be able to provide loans, equity and guarantees to help scale up investment for activities that value add into our resources sector. And for other strategic critical minerals projects that are nearing financial close, the government's $2 billion critical minerals facility stands ready to provide loans and other finance. And it is important to remember that the critical minerals strategy is not a shopping list of items. And while we prosper in this country from a wealth of resources, Australia cannot outspend economies significantly larger than our own. And I understand that many have become accustomed to a different mode of policy making where financial support and announcement has been given primacy over strategy and good planning. Financial investments by governments to support strategic projects where the market cannot is of course very important, often absolutely crucial. But we know that opaque markets for critical minerals make investment decisions really difficult. But it is wise to establish what strategic investments look like with the benefit of a well thought out, considered and inclusive strategy. And that is what the federal government has done with the release of the Critical Minerals Strategy. The Albanese government's policies will support companies right here in Queensland and right across the nation. In Gladstone, Alpha HPA is developing sustainable high purity alumina materials to market. This is what the government wants to see, projects that leverage technology and Australia's reputation for environmentally responsible, efficient production methods. This company has been supported through a $15 million grant from the Critical Minerals Development Program and a $45 million grant through the Modern Manufacturing Initiative Collaboration Stream Program. And we're also working closely with industry and international partners to ensure Australian projects link to emerging markets in the US, Britain, Japan, Korea, India, and members of the European Union. The new Australia-United States Climate Critical Minerals and Clean Energy Transformation Compact, for example, will ensure Australian projects are at the front of the queue in winning access to the billions of US dollars being put into clean energy projects by the Biden administration. It is a hugely significant development in our relationship with the US, and I'll be working, particularly the US National Security Council, to try and unlock what is over $560 billion worth of funding that the American government wants to put into clean energy and critical minerals. And as a trusted free trade partner under that Inflation Reduction Act, Australia, and therefore Queensland, is really very well placed to make sure we get some of that investment here in Australia into critical minerals projects. Minerals are essential to the nation's economic fabric, but they're also key to the world's energy transition plans. As we all know, many of these critical minerals are here in Queensland: cobalt, vanadium, and of course the Northwest Minerals Province will open up many more prospects again, and that's a really exciting thing to be happening here in Queensland. Working with the Queensland Government and industry, the Albanese Government will ensure we attract the investment needed to develop these opportunities and make them into projects that deliver jobs, sustainable economic development and future prosperity for the nation. We will build on the established traditional resources industry and the prosperity it delivers, and we'll also build on its strong ESG reputation that it has built right around the world. We will build on those traditional industries, iron ore and coal, gold, the very minerals that have made Australia what it is, and turn that into investment into critical minerals and rare earth elements in this country for a new resources economy. So I want to thank again the Queensland Government, particularly the Treasurer and the Resources Minister, for inviting me here today. It's a great pleasure to be up here enjoying this magnificent Brisbane winter that you call it, I believe. So thank you so much. I hope you have a great forum for the rest of the time. I have to get on a plane and hop back to Perth, but also hope the Minerals Congress goes really well. It's a very exciting thing to have the Minerals Congress, a global Minerals Congress here for the first time in 65 years. So thank you all so very much.
Thank you, Minister King, for your comments, and thank you to the Treasurer as well. I would like to now introduce Tony Knight. Tony Knight is Queensland's Chief Government Geologist. Leading the Geological Survey of Queensland, Tony's mission is to help drive economic growth from discovery and development of Queensland's mineral and energy resources. Please welcome Tony.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As Chief Government Geologist, it's a real privilege to have the World Mining Congress in Brisbane and to join in welcoming you today and tomorrow and the rest of the week who will be attending that great event. It's my job to give you a brief overview of the critical minerals resource sector in Queensland and the many opportunities, but also challenges that go with that. But before I get into the particulars of what we have, I think it's worth me painting a picture of who we are. Our modern history began in 1859 when we separated from our southern neighbour, New South Wales. For the first few years as Queensland, we struggled economically. And in quite an interesting precedent, the government of the time set in place a cash reward for the first person who could discover gold in proximity to Brisbane. In 1867, that occurred when John Nash found the Gympie gold deposit north of Brisbane. It was that discovery that set Queensland onto its feet and set us on the path that we follow today, where we're a global player in a supply of key commodities, gold and silver, copper, lead, zinc, bauxite, coal and gas, amongst other things. There are others too, such as silica sand, tungsten, nickel, and including nickel that we process from Pacific Islands as well. We've worked hard and created much for putting our resource endowment to best use. And we know how important our resources sector is, not only to us, but to those around the world that rely on what we have to power and manufacture the things we need as modern society. So we're very attuned to the future, to what is going on around the world, how that will impact and benefit our ability to help support sustainable economic prosperity. In short, we get the seismic shifts, the revolutions and transformations that are underway, driven by ongoing growth in population and development, with impacts of that growth driving global concern for sustainability, expressed via actions to reduce pollution, and particularly pollution of the atmosphere, which is driving the energy transition. It also drives growing expectation from society that we achieve greater balance between the elements of the triple bottom line: people, planet, and prosperity. Of demand for greater transparency, of responsible and ethical supply. With those expectations and demands most often expressed as companies and jurisdictions needing good ESG credentials. We see the global competition not only for resources, but also for the economic advantage that comes from moving them along the value chain. As we all know, concentration of supply of value-added products and industries has led to global trade and political tensions. In short, we are seeing a fundamental realignment of trade relations between nations, evidenced by establishment of bilateral and multilateral agreements between friendly nations, many of which have or include particular focus on critical minerals. We get all of those things, and to speak simply, recognise it is not only what we have, but how we go about the business of developing our resources that must feature in our thinking and actions. And that is exactly the reason why last year we released the Queensland Resources Industry Development Plan. Let me play you a short promotional video for that plan.
Every Queenslander benefits from our resources industry, and it has underpinned Queensland's economic development and prosperity for over a century. Our resources support around 77,000 jobs, thousands of businesses, and help pay for our schools, hospitals, roads, teachers, nurses, and doctors. We have long relied on coal, gas, and mineral resources. However, this traditional industry is now facing significant change. This will challenge our industry, but also provide a great opportunity for our sector. Queensland has a critical role to play in global decarbonisation by providing our abundant new economy minerals needed to produce renewable technologies. This will also require new skills and jobs to process the minerals and manufacture the technologies needed in the future. To ensure the industry continues to deliver jobs and royalties to Queensland, we have worked together with industry and communities to develop the Queensland Resources Industry Development Plan. The plan lays out a smooth transitional path for the next 30 years for Queensland's resources industry and the businesses and communities it supports. A path to a sustainable, responsible industry that continues to grow and create jobs and prosperity. Queensland's resources industry has changed for the better many times over the decades, pivoting to adapt to new discoveries, new technologies, and new global demand. The Queensland Resources Industry Development Plan. Rich in resources, ready for tomorrow.
Let me move now to highlight some of the opportunity areas we have in Queensland for critical minerals. In terms of occurrence, we have strengths in vanadium, as you've heard today, cobalt, rare earth elements, silica, including high purity quartz for silicon metal, and ores for use in production of high purity alumina, amongst other things too. And there's a large amount of industry activity in seeking to develop new sources of supply of those and other minerals. At the moment, exploration in Queensland is at an all-time high, with particular focus on copper. In general, though, the complexion of proponents seeking to develop critical minerals is primarily of junior companies in terms of market capitalisation, of new entrants who must work to prove their supply and operating credentials to win customer and investor support. We recognise the difficulties these proponents face in winning that support, and it is the very reason why we are developing the Queensland Resources Common User Facility. As the Treasurer outlined, it's a state government funded common user processing facility to operate at demonstration scale, so it throughputs volumes of hundreds to thousands of tonnes per year, with dual purpose of enabling the users to refine their flow sheets for full-scale facility design and to provide product to potential customers for metallurgical test work. It will also be multi-purpose, as much as that is practicable in mineral processing terms, and located in Townsville, already a major minerals industry centre and export port. Our support via the Common User Facility is to provide a boost to industry. But of course, our industry is already moving and growing rapidly in the critical minerals space, particularly in the advanced materials and battery sector. For batteries, they span the minerals and metals alphabet from A, as in the aluminium and graphene batteries, to Z, the zinc bromide flow batteries, both which are made here locally in Queensland. And congratulations to VECO for the great news last week about their vanadium electrolyte facility and battery manufacturing emissions. Let me finish now by looking across the supply-demand spectrum for critical minerals in Queensland. To the supply side first, we see this issue of junior companies who need help and of the sheer diversity of critical minerals. I mentioned earlier that our sector is based largely on gold, silver, copper, lead, zinc, bauxite, in terms of export volumes and values. The US lists 50 critical minerals, Australia 36, the EU more than 30. The sheer diversity of minerals presents its own challenges and opportunities. And given that demand for many of the critical minerals is relatively new, we don't have yet all the necessary infrastructure that is required. So we need to build it, or rather build the variety that is needed to process the diversity of minerals. But amongst all of this, we are in a race too. Countries and companies all see the opportunity to fundamentally reposition themselves, to move the weight of their economies to the higher value end of value chains by value adding in manufacture. It is a time to consider new business models and means of support, of working more collaboratively, for example, which through the lens of circular economy can provide beneficial outcomes in terms of capital efficiency, resource efficiency, avoidance of duplication, and many other benefits too. Also of creating demand-side pull by mechanisms such as offtake guarantee or strategic stockpiling, facilitated by investment of patient capital into essential enabling infrastructure. And the beauty of being here this week at World Mining Congress is our opportunity to discuss these matters in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. We will now hear from Tom Northcote, founder and managing director of VECO Group. As mentioned, VECO is developing the Dibella Critical Minerals Project and a network of vanadium battery electrolyte manufacturing facilities in Queensland, Italy, and the United States of America. Tom will share with you VECO's story and, importantly, why they chose Queensland. Please welcome Tom.
Years ago, when I talked about vanadium, I received a lot of puzzled looks. Global vanadium demand is forecast to rise by 100% by 2030. As the cost of lithium rises from demand for electric vehicles, vanadium is becoming a preferred alternative for large grid batteries. Northwest Queensland has known world-class deposits of vanadium with the potential to both supply the nation and our strategic trade partners. That's why our government is backing the industry to invest.
VECO Group's vanadium electrolyte facility in Townsville is the first in Australia and joins a growing list of plants under construction and in operation in the US, Japan, Korea, China, and Europe.
It's certainly an exciting time for the vanadium industry globally. We're on the verge of a vanadium revolution, and Queensland is at the forefront. As mentioned by the Queensland Premier, the vanadium market has come a long way in 5 years. Demand is growing, and Northwest Queensland has the second largest deposits in the world, with geology making them uniquely suited to supplying the global vanadium battery market. VECO Group operates an integrated business model, supported by our Dibella critical minerals mine, which will produce 5,500 tonnes of vanadium when in operation, and capacity to manufacture over 550 megawatt hours of vanadium electrolyte per annum using our own vanadium. This integrated model allows us to control the electrolyte supply chain and pass on price and supply certainty to our customers. Our customers are battery hardware manufacturers, renewable energy companies, and utility operators. But this is not just a plan, it's happening now. Last week, VECO announced commencement of operations at our vanadium electrolyte facility in Townsville and signed a deal to supply a vanadium battery to Energy Queensland, which we will deliver in partnership with Sumitomo Electric. VECO is supported by multiple Queensland-based family offices and 2 international institutional investors, Idemitsu from Japan and European manufacturer and trading house Koklarichi Group. These investors bring financial and strategic support to VECO as we grow within Australia and globally. Queensland has laid out its bold plan to enshrine its new renewable energy targets into law, making the Queensland Energy and Jobs Plan a firm commitment. The plan requires over 6 gigawatts of long-duration storage and 3 gigawatts of grid-connected storage. Due to their ability to scale energy separately to power, vanadium batteries can contribute to both of these needs, which puts the Queensland total market potential at over 100 gigawatt hours. A local vanadium battery supply chain can directly support this plan with local technology and jobs. And Queensland is not alone. The CEO of the Australian Energy Market Operator outlined last week that Australia will need to increase its grid storage assets by a factor of 30 by 2050, and that approximately 75% of that storage will need to be an average of 8 hours in duration. This longer duration storage directly aligns with the vanadium battery technology. To support our battery customers operating within a global supply chain and offering a major export market for Queensland's vanadium, we're also planning to construct a 500 megawatt hour facility in Texas in the US and a 100 megawatt hour facility in Italy in joint venture with Koklarichi. Locally, we will expand our facility in Townsville to 300 megawatt hours, 10 times its current scale. VECO is not new to the vanadium industry, and we've been building out our integrated business model since 2014. We have significantly progressed our Dibella critical minerals mine feasibility studies, signed a contract to supply the battery to Energy Queensland, constructed our vanadium electrolyte facility, and will now commence manufacturing for local batteries and also supply of electrolyte to customers in Southeast Asia. Should we receive environmental and mining approvals for our project in 2024, mining, processing, and electrolyte manufacturing facilities will be constructed and in operation to supply the local and global battery markets by 2026 to do our part in supporting the global energy transition.
This is Australia's first vanadium electrolyte facility. Let's go take a look. Within 2 years, the supply chain will be complete. We'll have vanadium mining, vanadium processing, and vanadium battery manufacturing in Queensland, creating over 500 regional jobs.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. That was great. We have one other case study that we'd like to share with you today, and we will hear from Kevin McNeil, Chief Executive Officer of EQ Resources. EQ Resources is targeting critical minerals and metal that are in high demand to meet those global shifts in energy, industry and sustainability. Kevin will discuss their investment in the tungsten mine at Mount Carbine, North Queensland, and associated benefits to the regional workforce and international relations. Please join me in welcoming Kevin.
Good afternoon, everybody. I wanted to draw your attention to this graph. There's a lot of information on this graph, but the one thing that's very important is the red arrow to the right and the bottom line that says economic importance to the EU, and you'll find tungsten there. Now, how can this little metal with 100,000 tons be so economically important to the Western world? We have little bits of tungsten in all kinds of things that we use every day. You don't get a lot of it in stuff, but you get little bits of it. And some of that stuff is on grater blades that are used every day, ripper teeth, nothing sexy like lithium or cobalt, but it's a metal that's been with us for about 200 years. And why is it so critical? You can't replace it. Tungsten. The only thing that could replace tungsten would be diamonds. Tungsten is the hardest metal that we have and has the highest melting point of any material, any metal. So it's used in defense. It's used in oil and gas and a variety. Now, why is it critical though? Like, yeah, we can find tungsten if the price goes up. You can find tungsten probably if the price goes high enough. But currently, China controls 83% of the world's tungsten, with Russia with another 5%, and Vietnam, also very close to the Chinese border, makes up probably half of the Western world's tungsten production. So you can see how tenuous it would be if we got in a dispute with any of these players. So if you shut off tungsten, literally all the manufacturing in the Western world basically shuts down because all the cutting tools, everything that's used in those grassroots industries just stopped completely. The US strategic stockpile is about 3% of the world, or 3% of what it used to be currently. So there's very little stockpiled tungsten in the world. So 2 things on tungsten. 2026, the US government has said that they're not buying any more Chinese tungsten for the military. That's one application for tungsten. The other application that is sexy is it's coming into electric car batteries in the anodes for fast charging. It can charge your electric car, hand tools, 5 minutes. In fact, 95% in 3 minutes is what's happening. And why is that tungsten so dense? It's a fantastic conductor. Next to gold, it's right up there. EQ as a company. So we started our journey in Queensland here. I come out of COVID, get stuck in a hotel here in Brisbane for a couple of weeks, right? And then get sent up to Mount Carbine, historic mining operation, very run down, if you will, very dilapidated. So we started on our journey, and with the support of the both provincial and federal government grants, we started with a METS Ignited grant to test the XRT sorters that we use currently on site. And these sorters, a lot of Chinese mines, for instance, they don't have ESG programs that we have to go through in the Western world. They don't have safety standards that we have to go through. And what it did, it forced us into trying new technologies to find our way around these narrow vein tungsten mines that are out there. So what these XRT sorters do is reduce the mass of the tungsten, mass of the ore that you process down 10% of what you normally would have to process. So it makes it very cheap. So we've got a METS Ignited grant, and then an AMGC grant, and then finally an accelerator to get into hard rock production. So our company has been busy working with several of these different companies that you see on the screen here that have helped us through. And we haven't gone a conventional route. We've gone with royalty fundings to get our project developed. We've gone with vendor finance, non-traditional. But what's happened in the past is a lot of companies overcapitalized in these tungsten mines, and then China would drop the price. So our mission was to keep the price of production as low as possible and as low a capital as possible. So we've come out of it, our overall debt, or our overall funding was about 26 million. We have 0 debt today on that project, 0 debt. So we're in a very good position to move forward. Part of our DNA in our company early on is that we actually sat down, we started this project and said, well, what do we want to do? What do we want to do as a company? What have we all learned over the years? So we developed these different strategies, if you will, and we work with a company, Jukes Todd. I see Steve is out in the audience there, but they help us with our ESG credentials and what's important to Australia, and help us guide us foreign companies into Australia and far north Queensland. What's important to them, right? What do we do, right? So some of the things that we found were important. We're working with the Australian Wildlife Fund. We support them. We have several school initiatives that are ongoing, but you have to have real initiatives, right, with the communities, interaction. And I can tell you, we had a stakeholder relations on Thursday because we had our first blast on the weekend, and everybody was so supportive of the initiatives that we have up there. This is just showing our development here. We started with a phased one, and like I said, we went with this phased approach where we did have the government grants to help us. We put in some sorters. We have very basic equipment. We moved into the second phase of operation, now into the hard rock, into the open pit. We had to dewater the open pit. And on the what's important on this one, though, is if you look on the right-hand side with the underground workings there. So this, what we're showing is the open pit with a 6-year mine life project. And the underground, that's only 20% of the overall resource. So we're urgently going to go underground and start developing and drilling off these resources. We know they're there in an inferred category, but we need to infill them now. So this mine will be multi-generational. I think from a what Queensland perspective, what has our journey been like, right? Well, you can see the timeline for anybody that's developed mines in this room, which I'm sure there's a good few of you, but you can see where we started in 2020 to where we're at now. We got 3 environmental amendments put through. We've got government support. We got government grant. We can call the minister at any time and talk to him. It's a fantastic place to work. So our project timeline, we went through tailings operation first, we went into waste dump secondly, and then we went into the hard rock this weekend. Project economics, just to give you a little bit. So what we call 10 kilograms is worth about $330 for 10 kilograms of the material. We're producing for $104. I think some of the numbers that are on here is the IRR is over 400% because we have very little debt or virtually none. So it makes the numbers look very good. And our NPV is 300 million. So this is just a shot of the pit. A year ago, this pit was full of water that anybody that's been up there, we managed it with the Department of Environment with 0 impact to the environment to get it out and completely drilled off now into the indicated category. And like I say, the first blast this weekend. So we're looking forward to that ore hitting the plant, which happens to be about 10 times higher grade than what we've been processing out of the waste dump. So we're anxiously awaiting that. But anyway, I'd just like to thank everybody for their time this afternoon and look forward. Anybody sees me out there, please just ask me any questions.
Thank you, Kevin. Someone just told me that was their favourite mine. It's really good. We will now move on to the panel discussion moderated by Dr. Cleanne Gabriel. Dr. Gabriel is the Global Co-Lead for Just Energy Transformation. She has a 16-year track record of designing and delivering high-value, high-impact sustainability services and programs in the consulting and research sectors in 4 OECD countries. Dr. Gabriel will introduce our panellists, so can you please welcome her and our panel for today.
Thank you for that introduction. Can I too also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet here today? I also pay my respects to their elders who no doubt continue their traditional custodianship of the lands on which we now call Brisbane, the Jagera and Turrbal people. The Honourable Cameron Dick, MP, Treasurer and Minister for Trade and Investment. Mrs. Cherise Mullin, thank you for the introduction, MP, Assistant Minister for Treasury. The Honourable Scott Stewart, MP, Minister for Resources. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to be the moderator for this evening's, I've lost track of time, panel discussion today about critical minerals. I am Cleanne Gabriel, and I, as Cherise mentioned, have been working in sustainability and decarbonization for the past 16 years or so, and I continue to be extremely passionate about it. And so I'm really looking forward to this conversation today. I'm going to introduce the 5 esteemed individuals who will join me on stage in a few minutes, who are all extremely accomplished, well accomplished in their fields, very opinionated, and it is my unenviable task to try to keep the conversation on track today. The first person who will join me on stage is Mr. Peter Mellor, who is the Commercial Director for Heritage Minerals. So Peter is a globally experienced commercial and operations director in the mining and infrastructure industries. Among other current executive roles, Peter is a director of Heritage Minerals, the owner of the Mount Morgan Tailings Processing and Rehabilitation Project in central Queensland, and has brought that project from pre-feasibility study through to approvals. Peter has university qualifications in business and science. He's worked as a director of mining engineering company Worley Parsons and has developed pit-to-port projects in a number of international jurisdictions, including Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, and Sierra Leone. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome to the stage Mr. Peter Mellor. Next up is Mrs. Alison Hill. Alison is the state's Chief Investment Officer within the state investments team, and she has direct responsibility for all the portfolios managed on behalf of the state of Queensland. You joined QIC's state investments team in January 2018, Alison, and the team is responsible for managing approximately $58 billion in assets on behalf of the state of Queensland. With over 28 years' experience, it's very impressive in investment management and financial markets. Prior to joining QIC, Alison was the Chief Executive Officer at DMP Asset Management, where she oversaw the investment process and asset consulting practice. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome to the stage Alison Hill. I see my panelists getting ready to get onto stage. It's good. Next up is Dwayne Woodbury, who is Chief Financial Officer at QPM, Queensland Pacific Metals. Mr. Woodbury has over 25 years' experience in listed equity markets in Australia and overseas, with a number of organizations, including Macquarie Bank and as CFO to Kingsgate Consolidated Limited. His most recent role was CFO at Metro Mining Limited, where he successfully procured the funding required to construct the Bauxite Hills mine and also secured a loan from Northern Australia Infrastructure Facility to fund expansion initiatives. During his career, Dwayne has managed large debt and equity raisings for development and operating companies, primarily in the resources sector. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Dwayne Woodbury. Next on the stage, Dr. Lynette Molyneux, who is the Director of the Advanced Minerals and Battery Council. Dr. Lynette Molyneux is a researcher in climate, energy, and industry policy at the University of Queensland. She's currently a research fellow with the Center for Policy Futures, seeking to advance collaboration between academia, government, and industry for the development of an advanced materials and battery sector in Australia. Prior to her academic pursuits, Lynette spent more than 20 years in the IT industry, managing an internet and business intelligence startup in New Zealand, as a brand manager at IBM UK and a financial planner at IBM South Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Lynette Molyneux. Last but certainly not least, Mr. Chris Leserve, who is our Head of Investment Industry in Investment and Commercial at Queensland Treasury. Chris is, as I mentioned, the Head of Investment at Queensland Treasury and leads a broad multidisciplinary team focused on partnering with private sector organizations to grow Queensland's economy. Chris has worked predominantly in the strategy and business transformation space and across the full company life cycle, having played key roles in raising capital and establishing new companies in overseas territories through to downsizing large corporates. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Mr. Chris Leserve. That this microphone, yes, it works. Perfect. I was having one of those days. I was worried about technology today. So can I just start with a broad question, because we heard some really great inspiring stories from VECO Group and EQ Resources previously about the work that they're doing right here in Queensland. Can I just ask very broadly, why Queensland? Why are we so attractive to investors? Why critical minerals? I might turn to you, either Chris, Alison, Lynette, to start us off with this conversation.
Well, look, I might kick off if I may. Look, I think, and if some of you were in this room a short while ago, and a person called Vu Tran was up on this stage talking about sort of the why Queensland. And a lot of that came down to the spirit of Queensland and people being prepared to sort of give it a go. And I think that's a real sort of key enabler. We've got a room full of people today that have come to hear about effectively a rapidly emerging industry, and all credit to Tom for what you're doing in the VECO space. So we've got people like Tom, we've got other people in the audience today that are prepared to sort of give it a go. I think certainly on my side, what I sort of see is a very supportive environment, and really that's underpinned by about 3 or 4 different things. It's a very clear set of strategies. And we've heard from the Department of Resources about the industry development plan. Just recently, the government announced the new industry development plan that's been put in place. We've also got some very broad facilitation processes that really support a range of organisations, and some of them are in the room today to sort of progress their projects, whether it's through site planning work, whether it's through sort of helping with the skills sort of side of things. And then more importantly, on my side of the fence, I guess, we've heard the Treasurer and others talk about the Queensland Resources Common User Facility. I think that's a really key bit of kit that's going to be delivered up in Townsville that's going to help fast track some of these emerging miners at a lower cost and a lower risk to those organisations. And there's also some dedicated sort of bespoke funds that are out there as well that again have been deployed for some of the organisations that are in this room that again sort of help them get through that growth journey.
It's good to hear, and it's also really good to see that government's focusing on helping some of our smaller organizations as well, as they're also seeking to join the battery race, as the Treasurer mentioned at the start of this conversation. Lynette, did you have anything to add from that Queensland perspective?
Well, I've got lots to add, but I'll keep it to a minimum. The Queensland is an interesting opportunity in many respects. It has its own resources. There is experience in both mining and processing resources. It has some fantastic universities which have a world-class battery tech, processing tech that are right on our doorstep. Australia's been very good at exporting all of our battery tech. We have the opportunity now to actually encourage it to stay in Queensland specifically, but also Australia. And we also have the Queensland government, which delightedly, I could say, is listening to what industry is asking, because these are small companies. They do have a suite of challenges which are not necessarily the case associated with any big mining company. And it is important for the government to support them in every way they possibly can in terms of being able to, get over the hurdles of finance, get over the hurdles of seeking to commercialize locally, and to really support a global energy transition.
Excellent. So I'm hearing that we're supporting across the entire life of mine. We've also got capabilities right here, and you mentioned universities, Lynette, which is a real huge part of your sort of core contribution here in the sector and in the state as well. Alison, I might just ask you then, is that sort of what those institutional investors are looking at, that they find attractive here?
Absolutely. I mean, from an institutional perspective, what you want is, a good understanding of the risks and returns that you're undertaking when you make an investment. So I'm looking, I guess, at the commercialisation or the financial, so the investment return type lens, and Queensland absolutely provides that. We obviously have a very, stable rule of law and government. We have a very supportive regulatory regime for that sort of sustainable development of the mining industry. And then combine that with the, the education that we have. We have really skilled people who are working in this space. So I think all of those things add up to make Queensland a really attractive place to think about, well, how can we, as an industry, because the broad institutional investment industry, I think, is very keen to participate in the energy transition.
That's wonderful. And Chris, you highlighted some of the other initiatives that the Treasurer mentioned just at the start. Are you able to give any more insight at all on the Critical Minerals Battery Fund that he just mentioned today as well?
Yeah, so look, I think it was pleasing today to hear about the fund being opened. So that's a $100 million critical minerals and battery technology fund that's going to be sort of distributed across essentially sort of a couple of financial instruments. So we're going to be working very closely with our colleagues at QIC. So about $80 million of that fund will go towards equity type sort of investments, and about $20 million of that fund will be available for small organisations by way of sort of grants. So that's now sort of open. People can go online at QIC, look at the website, be able to sort of make their inquiries and progress application forms from today.
Yeah, excellent. Before I go to the next question, I forgot to mention, we are going to be taking some questions from the audience. So do think about what you would like to hear from these experts on the panel today. And there's a roaming mic somewhere in the room, and they'll come to you if your hand's up. There we go. They will come to you if you put your hand up, and you will have an opportunity to ask questions as we progress today. I want to turn to the businesses represented today on the panel. So Peter and Dwayne. Peter, just for those who may not be fully familiar with everything that Heritage is doing, can you give us just a brief overview? What's Heritage Minerals doing at the moment? And then how are you contributing potentially to decarbonisation and the batteries race?
Yeah, sure. So while you might not know Heritage Minerals, most people would know the mine leases of Mount Morgan, which Heritage has today. And Heritage just has them today. I mean, Mount Morgan is connected with most of Queensland. Many world firsts came out of there in terms of metallurgy, power, engineering, etc. But for the last 20 years has been in the abandoned mines department. And Heritage is lucky enough to have an agreement with the state of Queensland, which was first signed in the early 2000s, which effectively encouraged private industry, entrepreneurial spirit. I call it a public-private partnership with Department of Resources that run the site currently, and Heritage to reprocessing the legacy tailings and contribute to the overall cleanup of the site. Those tailings, there's about 30 years of resource in the top 25 gold mines in Australia, gold, copper and silver, and they're green, they're from the waste. But then the phase 2 at the site is pyrite.
Yes.
So pyrite is acid. Acid currently comes from the world's most polluting refineries of sulphur, and it's probably the largest resource in Queensland of pyrite. So ultimately taking the acid off the site, which reports to the Great Barrier Reef. So it's a really great project that we've been blessed by all levels of government, but we invest in Queensland, did support us along the way, and NAIF more recently, to the point that earth moving equipment moved in last week.
So it's a great waste to resource story, isn't it? Sort of contributing to the circular economy. Is that how you're thinking about it from that sustainability contribution perspective for Heritage?
Yeah, for those key metals in our early stage,
Yes.
and then the pyrite being a key reagent in the form of acid to the green metals and the critical minerals.
Excellent. Can I just turn to you then, Dwayne, and ask you to just provide a bit of insight for us and for the audience as to what QPM's up to, and then what are you thinking in terms of the broader push towards decarbonisation for the state?
Well, thanks. Thanks for the question. For those of you who may not be familiar with Queensland Pacific Metals, we're developing a new refinery in Townsville, which will take high-grade imported nickel laterite ore from our Pacific partners, New Caledonia, and process that into nickel sulfate, cobalt sulfate, and other co-products such as high-purity alumina and high-grade hematite. And obviously, the first two go to the EV market, which is rapidly growing, and our three largest shareholders and off-takers are General Motors, LG and POSCO, which are three of the biggest battery makers globally. I think from a sustainability perspective, the process is highly energy intensive. We'll be the largest gas consumer on the east coast of Australia when in production. And our solution for that energy is to take waste mine gas, currently being vented and flared in the Bowen Basin with the metallurgical coal mines there, and through using existing infrastructure, which runs literally past our doorstep in Townsville, that will provide the energy for the refinery to produce the critical minerals. That has meant that we are a net negative carbon producer of nickel, which is the only one of its kind globally, by being able to capture and harvest this waste gas from the mines which are currently venting or flaring this product.
Oh, that's good to hear then. And so can we get a little more technical for just a wee bit? Peter, I'm turning back to you here to find out a bit more about that, the technology at the forefront of your reviving of the Mount Morgan mine. How are you partnering to develop this technology, and who are you partnering with? And do you see any sort of broader applicability beyond what you're doing on Mount Morgan in the reprocessing of other tailings sites?
Yeah, sure. So the main technology partner with the Heritage Mineral Project is Green Gold. And Green Gold has some technology at the back end of the plant that recycles cyanide. So when you're going after the tails a second time, you put a fair bit of cyanide in there and you fine grind, and that reduction in OPEX to be able to recycle it and not destroy it is a key beneficiary. And that technology has only been commercialised in the last 5 years.
Yes.
And, you know, I think the project as a whole is more of a blueprint for other tailings projects.
Yes.
Whilst the agreements are fantastic and they give us the legal surety to attract investment and move forward with the project, the execution of those agreements in terms of environmental approvals, heritage, has been a whole of government approach to implement an execution model that can be delivered in the field.
Can you give a bit more insight there, Peter? I know I'm picking on you a bit, but I might come back to you, Dwayne, and ask the same question, because you said it's a whole of government approach, and it's why we're here, to learn more about how we work in partnership with government as a partner, as an investor to achieve these goals. You want to give us a bit more insight into that process that you went through?
Yeah. It was always welcoming. Like I say, I describe it as a public-private partnership. And even today on the site, there's areas of the mine leases which are DOR controlled, and there's areas that are being operated under the Mining Act. We work with Department of Resources quite closely, and the foresight of people that had the project before us to develop what we call the Stage 2 agreement, which is the responsibilities of the site for a common rehab objective for the site, with a contractor operating on the site, was instrumental. And that document in particular has helped us through and helped the departments work with us for the best of site outcome on the site. So that includes going forward, a tailings project, which is seen as short mine life for first phase with new technology, isn't the easiest thing to raise capital for.
Yeah, I heard.
For a small miner in debt. So facilities such as the Invest in Queensland and NAIF, which in a township of Mount Morgan is not your Ballarat, your Kalgoorlie, which has a lot of wealth left behind, but the people, the town's in the open cut pits in the middle of town, and they are the most supportive residents we could ask for, and we're hoping to do the right thing and recruit up to 150 people during operations and spend 30 million annually in the local community as a consequence of these early gates being opened by the Queensland government.
Excellent. Craig Wilson shared with me before what an extremely grueling process you went through to get this done. And he said you're actually 23 years old. You've aged quite a bit in the process of getting through, getting this off the ground. And it's from just you describing this process, it did sound very, very intense. But this is an extremely, I think, welcome success story. I don't know how many people are aware of this, but just globally, one of the main sticking points for sustainability projects, particularly things around rehabilitation, etc., it's often around the partnerships. It's around forming these effective relationships. So I actually think it's great that you've, after all the headache and the stress, you've managed to be able to come through the other end quite well. Yeah.
Yeah, lots of people in the company comment on how I aged during the process, but I'm staying on just long enough to hand over the green medals to the Australian Olympic Committee.
Oh, nice. That's a good strategy. Dwayne, do you want to just share a little bit about QPM's process and its partnership and working with government?
Yeah, look, I think we've had a really, really good or great relationship with the Queensland government, and I think you need that because a lot of companies such as ours, you're sort of breaking new ground. You're producing metal which has no terminal market. They're complex, long lead time projects. So you need to sort of bring the government and other stakeholders, private stakeholders along. And I think there's no roadmap. And what's been great with Chris in particular and the work he's been doing with us is they sit down and listen to the challenges. Don't always solve them because we don't know exactly how to solve them, but provide the blueprint for us to get ultimately to the end point, which is a final investment decision, which we hope to make by the end of the year, and build these projects which can contribute to the decarbonisation and the revolution that we're seeing in energy security and energy itself.
Yeah, and it's good to have blueprints like this right here in Queensland that others around the world can follow as well, can look to. Absolutely. I will just ask, are there any questions from the floor at the moment? If you just put your hand up and someone with a roving mic will come to you. We've got a question just in the middle here, Christelle, and while the mic is coming to you, I will get one more question off my chest. And it's for you, actually, Alison. How does QIC partner with Queensland companies on these investment opportunities in critical minerals?
Thank you. I think, one of the key ones will be in the Critical Minerals and Battery Technology Fund, which has just been announced by the Treasurer, which I think is a terrific initiative. From our perspective, we will be seeking to, think about how we can aid that, investment lens and think about the investment return. So the project or the fund is set up to have a commercial set of return and think about the risk-adjusted return outcomes, but the objective is also to think about jobs growth for Queensland and growing industry for Queensland as well. So I think it has those, dual objectives of commerciality, but as well as growing industry for Queensland and doing it in an area where there is, obviously a terrific need and an area where Queensland has a strong advantage to be able to grow a sustainable industry.
Yeah, the jobs conversation is a really important one. As Cherise mentioned in her introduction, I do work in just transformation a lot, and that conversation around the globe is a really big one, right? About how do we get people into new skills and new areas to support this energy transition. I will turn to the audience now for one question, if you please. If you don't mind just stating your name and where you're from.
Andrew Behag from QIC, and it's a question for Peter. And it's really just understanding how you balance your profitability with environmental benefits and outcomes, and is there a compromise?
So the project is commercially viable in its own right, so thanks for the question. These numbers are in the public domain. It's 2 million tonnes per annum, producing 60,000 ounces of gold out of tailings. It's not hard rock, that's 1.2 grams. So that's a good project in any sense, that model. Now, the project is moving 2 million tonnes of acid-forming tails from 100 years ago into a properly engineered TSF. So in the process, taking the acid budget that currently drains into the Dee River, Fitzroy Basin, Great Barrier Reef, and encapsulating in a properly engineered facility. Now, obviously, making sure we can access it in phase 2 for that pyrite. But it obviously has a massive environmental upside, because prior to this project, did not know the fascinating history of Mount Morgan. I knew about it because of the acid mine drainage problem, and I was embarrassed when I learnt about what it's done for this country as a site. So now we're glad that we can continue the legacy at that site with a commercially driven outcome that has massive environmental benefits, net environmental benefit.
Yeah, it's a great question, actually, because this is the sort of the tension that we're all grappling with now as we move along this journey towards net zero. I think it's something like the World Energy Council says we need maybe 7 to 9 times more mining globally in order to actually achieve the goals of net zero, which is, sort of a, yes. So I just wanted to, as we reflect on that, before we get to just another question, I think it's really important just to get thoughts potentially from you, Lynette, and you, Chris, because you work in sort of that investment space, how we're finding that balance between the commercial realities, making sure these projects are successful, and then environmental outcomes as well.
Well, the commercial realities are that Europe and maybe in a few years' time, North America will go down the route of requiring carbon border adjustments, ESG credentials. So there will be a geopolitical advantage, shall we call it, associated with ESG supply into the Northern Hemisphere. So it is becoming part of the policy settings for Europe, and certainly I think not too distant future for the United States as well. So in itself, it funds itself in terms of making sure that the ESG credentials are met, and that the supply of these metals and minerals are according to consumer requirements.
Excellent. So there is that market push anyway, and if you be able to secure offtake agreements, for example, then, and usually for greener credentials as well, there's an advantage in the market as well. Thank you. I understand we have another question behind me. Yes, please introduce yourselves.
Yes, hello. Simon Michaud from the Geological Survey of Finland, Circular Economy Solutions. How fast can a mining license be granted in Queensland if there's no hold-ups? Asking for a friend.
I don't know where to go. We don't actually have a mine in Queensland, but I think that's a very complex question and would relate to particularly some of the environmental issues that may or may not be associated with the mine, the level of advance and the studies involved with that. So I think Western Australia and Queensland by far and away are at the forefront of achieving mining licence grant in the quickest possible way. But there is a process that you need to go through, and indeed industry wants to go through that to ensure that we operate at the best practice we can environmentally or ESG. But in terms of comparison, I think Queensland is certainly up there with the most expeditious states in Australia.
The reason I ask is in Europe we're having this discussion about opening a mining frontier, and to hit our targets, this will make you laugh, we have to compress that process down to 3 months or less. Otherwise, we will not hit our targets.
I don't think it's 3 months, but anyway, try to meet those. We've got a target.
Joy. Thank you for that question. Dwayne, while you have the mic, if you would mind sharing for the rest of the audience, you have secured investment now from beyond Queensland, from overseas companies as well. Do you want to just share a little bit of the lessons you learned and what there might be in terms of takeaways for Queensland-based companies from your experiences there?
Look, we're very proud that our 3 largest shareholders are General Motors, LG and POSCO, and they are our offtake partners. And there was a lot of work over a long period of time to secure those at this stage of our development on the journey with us. I think the key takeaway, or 2 key takeaways I would have with those, is the first being that these are highly complex, long lead time and large CapEx projects. So there has to be an alignment of both parties in order for a successful long-term partnership. So in the early stages, ensure the investor, the offtake are aligned with what reality will be. This is not a 3-month process. This is a 3 or 5 year process. So alignment of interest, absolutely critical. And if they're not there, then you move on. I think the second point is that when you look at investment in these early stages, you've got to keep your eye on the end goal, which is when you're ready to build the projects, you need to raise a lot of money, both debt and equity, and you need to set up the investment and the shareholder base to facilitate that. So always have that goal in mind when you're negotiating the agreements in order to get investment today, to allow us to reach that final investment decision, which really we all are striving to achieve in an expeditious way as possible.
Yes, absolutely. Do we have any other questions from the floor before I ask another? We do. We have got a hand over on this side. Any other hands so we can send a roaming mic to you? Yep, we've got another one here as well. Yes, please.
Hello, it's Namali McKay from the Critical Minerals Association of Australia. I've got another environmental question for Dwayne again. Just wondering, based on what you've said with your offtake partners, has there been a requirement for you to follow a particular ESG sort of reporting standard? Has it been quite onerous? Have you had to change the way you're practicing things, and how have you found that process out of interest?
That actually is a very good question, because if we didn't have our operating practice of how we were going to produce nickel, how we're going to source our energy and how our carbon footprint was, they wouldn't be our partners. So it wasn't so much us conforming to their requirements, because our requirements were very similar at the start. So it was more them seeking us out because of what we offered in terms of that, particularly that carbon footprint. And with the battery passport in the UK, with something very similar in the US, they are really wanting clean, green nickel and cobalt. And anyone in this room who knows both products knows that it's very hard today, let alone in 5 years' time, to get a very environmentally sustainable source of supply for both of those commodities.
We had another question from the audience here.
Good evening. This is B. Sahu, Executive Director of NMDC, National Mineral Development Corporation, India, Hyderabad. My question is, what is the tentative or probable reserve of lithium in Queensland State? Lithium reserve, mineral reserve pertaining to lithium.
Sorry, I said the opportunity. What is the opportunity for lithium?
This is reserve or resource of lithium in million tons or in billion tons.
The lithium resource.
Yeah.
So, if I paraphrase the question, you're after a source of lithium. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, in Queensland. Look, Queensland, as hopefully sort of Tony and others sort of pointed to, has a whole bunch of critical minerals, but sort of lithium isn't something that we have within the sort of the region. So very happy to have conversations about other sort of critical minerals, but lithium isn't something that we would have in abundance here in the state.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We do have another question from this gentleman here in the middle.
We do have a prospect for lithium in the state. It's called Buchanan's Creek, and we're open to partnership. It's a large area of highly metasomatized rock with lithium throughout it, and it's just out of Georgetown. And once we get a partner and some good capital, there's a very good chance we'll have a mine there.
Well, look, I suggest there's an exchange of contact details there. I think that's exactly why these forums occur. I think if there's an exchange of business cards, we can get that lithium project off. And then, look, obviously, Treasury's investment team is available to support you, progressing that project, to move it forward. So very pleased to hear. Could I just make one point, I guess, and Dwayne sort of touched upon it a little bit in terms of, from an investments perspective, from a Treasury perspective, we appreciate that these projects are really difficult. We appreciate that the timelines are often very long. We appreciate that effectively there will be surprises and road bumps and challenges along the way. And I think what we try and do, with organisations in that sort of space is really try and play that sort of trusted partner role. We know that there are going to be those sort of speed bumps. We know that you don't get, a multi-billion-dollar project up and off the ground within a 3 to sort of 6 month sort of time frame. There's a whole range of different sort of complexities there. So, the role that we sort of seek to play is really in that sort of trusted partnership space. And we try and play that role for the long term, noting sort of, what will be delivered if the projects get over the line. So please, come and have conversations with myself, come and have conversations with my team that's here today, because we're very keen to sort of play that role with you, particularly in this critical minerals industry sector.
Yeah, I think that's actually, it's a really good point and way to sort of to aim to wrap up, because I know we're potentially going to run out of time, because that's where Queensland government shines. That's where your strength is, in supporting those really risky long-term projects as well. I might just turn to each panelist really quickly and ask for 1 or 2 reflections or lessons learned, because you're coming from different points. You're coming from the investor's perspective, from the investee perspective for the 2 companies on the panel. And so what have you learned so far from your experiences right here in Queensland that you think others can benefit from? 1 or 2 key takeaways. Can I start with you, Lynette? Or not?
Sitting on my laurels waiting for Peter to come up with this. From an academic perspective, from a policy perspective, there are certain things that are really successful in terms of developing new sectors. And probably the most important thing in all of that is that there's a tight collaboration between government, industry, and academia or researchers. And without that tight collaboration, you don't get all the benefits that we have of sitting in a room and finding an investor. We don't have the benefits of university professors actually sitting in meetings with industry to discuss the challenges they're having and finding a shortcut route to resolve that. So for me, the reflection of the entire critical minerals to battery tech opportunity is this tight collaboration between all the stakeholders to actually get through the process as fast as possible.
Thanks. Dwayne?
Yeah, I think the two takeaways I would have had is that I've been not surprised, but really happy about, if you come up with an idea of industry working with government, what about this? They're very open in order to assess that and work with you. Doesn't always work, but they're very open. So think outside the box, and you'll certainly get a very good reception from the government and other stakeholders up here. That's the first point. And secondly, I think the regional area in Queensland, we're building our refinery in Townsville, and there's a lot going on in Townsville, but the level of skills, the personnel, the infrastructure, and it's a great place to live, means that it's certainly a really, really fruitful way to bring some of these projects on. So I think the regional part of Queensland is a real plus for this state.
Yeah, excellent. Good to hear. Alison, from your perspective, from QIC.
Yeah, and I think the Queensland government's been, quite innovative in thinking about how it can support growth in Queensland across a wide range of industries. And since 2015, we've been working with the government in establishing a range of different funds. For example, the Back in Queensland Business Investment Fund, which is about growing industry in Queensland. And I think the Critical Minerals and Battery Technology Fund is another really strong example of where it is trying to sort of enable partnerships between government, ourselves, and then industry to be able to grow industry. So I think, that's a really, hopefully going to be a really powerful tool.
Yeah, good to hear. And Peter, your final words.
Yeah, for us, it's just been about working with government. There's a whole heap of parties that are taking on more risk by us being present on the site.
Mm.
But the future state of Mount Morgan, we just thought we were getting it going and mining some gold. But, you know, we've got the high school apprenticeship program there. It's the second oldest high school in Queensland. We're filming a documentary currently. Watch out for that. It'll be on Netflix once we produce some gold. But we've along the way we've been having monthly communications with all departments in government and steering the ship to where it is right now. Which is funded.
And absolutely ticking all those boxes for the E, the S, and the G. And you talk about the school and the community impacts and all of that. These are just extremely great examples of not just the battery race and decarbonisation, but also supporting communities right here in Queensland. Please help me thank these 5 people for joining us today and sharing their insights. Thank you. And look forward to further conversations with you outside for over drinks. Thank you very much. Can I invite back to the stage Mrs. Cherise Mullin, our MP and Assistant Minister for Treasury, to conclude today's proceedings.
So thank you, Dr. Gabriel, and to our panel members for your contribution, thoughts and advice. One more round of applause, I think, for all our panel members today. And a big thank you to those who posed questions. Now, if you did have a burning question and you were unable to get it answered, please know that there'll be a chance to chat with our panellists during the networking session. Now, to conclude this afternoon's formal proceedings, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome the Honourable Scott Stewart MP, Queensland Minister for Resources, to deliver the closing remarks. Please welcome Scott.
Imagine following that group. Thank you, whoever put together this program. Can I first acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we meet today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'm from Waggaroogaba and Bindal country. That's Townsville, and by the sounds of everything, it's all happening in Townsville, right? But great to have you all here today. Can I start by an ancient Chinese proverb, or maybe it's a curse? May you live in interesting times. And I think that's exactly where we are right now, and particularly right here in Queensland. So let's go through a little bit of what's happened today. The Palaszczuk government's vision around the resource sector comes down to 3 words: transform, diversify, thrive. Transform, diversify, thrive. That's what we've heard this afternoon. That's what we've heard all day. So how are we doing that? Well, as the Treasurer said, there's $75 million for the Queensland Resource Common User Infrastructure, the first of its kind in the Indo-Pacific. Now, we've seen the eyes light up from a whole range of junior miners saying this is going to be the game changer for us. But then we've come out again and we said, well, here's a $5 billion project called CopperString 2032 that's going to deliver a transmission line of renewable energy that's going to unlock around $500 billion worth of critical minerals in the Northwest Minerals Province. So if your eyes aren't bulging already, no, we can't do 3 months to do your approval, okay? 3 months is just a little bit too quick for us. But there is a whole range of things that we're heading in the right direction. Another one that we've heard today is about new ways to access minerals, including recycling our riches, which is reprocessing our tailings mines. It's about looking at our waste rock that we heard from EQ Resources, and it's about looking at our abandoned mines. And literally what we heard from Heritage Minerals was that's what they're doing. And maybe Peter, here's your tagline, mate. This is your marketing idea. It's called recycling our riches when you think about getting those gold from those tailings dams. But let's look at our energy and jobs plan as well that we're implementing here in Queensland. To achieve this, we're going to need 2,700 wind turbines. We're going to need 25 million additional solar panels. We're going to need 7,000 batteries. So to put this in a bit of a minerals context, we're going to need 24.5 million tonnes of minerals just to achieve what we want to achieve here in Queensland alone, to achieve our renewable targets that we've set very clearly. And so when we have VECO Group in Townsville, doing their vanadium batteries. They're putting together the first pilot, mate, and it's absolutely brilliant. We were out there last week looking at that. It is absolutely brilliant. We're going to need 7,000 of them just to achieve what we want to achieve in Queensland alone. So let's extrapolate that out. What does it look like for the rest of Australia? What does it look like in the South Pacific, particularly for our island nations, where they're using diesel power generators? There are some great opportunities that exist right here in this state. So what's on the horizon for us? Well, we've heard about the US and Australia sign the Climate, Critical Minerals and Clean Energy Transformation Compact. $500 billion towards that. There's some great opportunities that exist here right now for us. We've also got the German battery passport by 2027. We've got the world's economies are decarbonising at such a rapid speed that we need to be a part of this. The desire for ESG credentialing of minerals right across the world and the importance of that, and Queensland and Australia is so well positioned to take advantage of that. So we heard Madeleine talk about, we have the geology and we have the policy to set investment in the resource industry right here in Queensland. So this sets us up nicely to position ourselves to extract, to process, to refine, and to manufacture our future with the rich endowments of the Northeast and the Northwest Minerals Province for both domestic and our international markets. And we've heard it say, we've heard it from Dr. today, you can't have a strong renewable industry without a strong resources industry to complement that. And that's exactly where we're going. So, Treasurer's had some great announcements today, but tomorrow we've got the Premier up on stage, and I can almost guarantee that there's going to be some more announcements tomorrow, and I'm really eagerly anticipating that. So from the Department of Resources, a number of you have worked very closely with us, and I'm hoping you've seen that change from being a regulator to a facilitator. Our job is to help you get your mine up and running. Our job is to make sure that we can do everything in our power to make it smooth, not in 3 months, but to make this a smooth process where we help you to get your investors, that we help you to be able to extract your product, and we help you to actually manufacture here in Queensland. We have the capability, we have the capacity, but more importantly, we have the passion. And so thank you so much for coming along this afternoon. I hope you've enjoyed our presentations. If you have any questions whatsoever, please catch up with us. Particularly, we've had Treasury say that they're really keen to talk to a lot of people. So make sure that there's a lineup in an orderly fashion to talk to those guys. But enjoy the rest of the Congress, and thank you for all those that have travelled to our great state and to enjoy what we call, winter in paradise. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Stewart. A terrific way to round out today's Investor Forum. And we have now come to the conclusion of today's forum. I'd like to once again thank all of the speakers for their valuable time, contribution, and for joining us today. Thank you to all of you, our guests, who have taken the time to be with us. I hope that you have found today's Investor Forum beneficial. Critical minerals is an important topic, and it is vital that we stay connected and keep this conversation going. Please look out for an email which will include a recording of today's proceedings, and in addition, an invitation to provide feedback. We do a number of these investor forums, and we're always very interested in the feedback that we receive to ensure that we always are hitting the mark. For those of you who are attending the World Mining Congress, please enjoy the next 3 days, and I hope it's a productive experience for you. Thank you once again for your contribution today, and please do join the Treasurer and I in the foyer for some well-deserved drinks now. Thank you and good afternoon.